That's right, community, it's AI Friday. This week, we'll embed the most pertinent buckets on AI in the news to help you ingest for inference. Before we get going, don't forget to click like and subscribe. And now, unprompted, AI Friday.
Hey, community. That's right. We're back for yet another AI Friday. I've got Byron, Joel, and Pete with me this week. Thank you, gentlemen, for showing up. I know it's been a busy week for you guys. Have been traveling, right?
That's right.
Both of you were
good to be here.
We were physically together in several meetings this week.
That's right.
You guys were in
we were
DC?
absolutely talking to federal customers. Prior to that, NVIDIA GTC and Intel Vision, and so I've kind of got hardware on the brain today, Aubrey. I'm going to warn you right now.
I like when you have hardware on the brain, Joel. It's great. It ends up being really good for the podcast for sure. And we are actually going to talk about hardware, actually. So, gosh, we could probably slide right into it, to be honest. I mean, no reason to kind of chew the fat or anything. Google's Ironwood TPU came out, and
yeah.
I just want to preface this. I probably should have done this before I brought up the first story, but one of the things that I'm doing this week is I ended up at the end of last episode. I said I wouldn't read the articles and I would actually feed the articles to O1. So I am going to represent O1 and just kind of I asked it a few questions about each of the articles as well. So
Okay.
I'll be brief, but that's going to be kind of my contribution today. We'll bring the AI into focus as well.
So AI generated content will be included in this podcast.
Honestly, Pete, that's one of the things that I wanted to do with this podcast from the start. I purposely don't change my like nasty AI social posts. I mean, they look like an AI wrote it because it's AI Friday. Like,
Good point.
AI is going to help with it. So, and that's kind of part of the promise. So, I guess first of all, if you're kind of scratching your head out there and wondering what is TPU, wanted to bring that up. Yeah, alphabet soup.
It's definitely an alphabet soup. This is really difficult for some people to navigate, and quite frankly, guys, just understand that when someone says something PU to you, it's probably a marketing term that is specific to their company. So when you're talking to Intel calls their DPU style kit an infrastructure processing unit, and other people call it a data processing unit. So on the NVIDIA side, you'll see the Bluefield 3. On the Intel side, you'll see some of their Phantom Lake series. That one will call it an IPU, one will call it a DPU. What it is essentially a really smart NIC that's built for purpose for doing things like AI infrastructure management and clustering. And then, of course, you've got, TPU, and we're going to talk about the Google Ironwood TPU here in a moment, and that they call that because it's a tensor processing unit built for TensorFlow style math. And then there's some companies that call it an NPU. Intel likes to call it an NPU, which stands for Neural Processing Unit. And then, of course, you've got GPUs out there, and that still stands for Graphics Processing Unit, even though you're using it for AI.
And now there were some interesting sort of analogies as well.
Yeah. So understand that AI is whether you're doing training or inferencing, it involves sets of math that are used in things like prefill of vector states or decodes, and those types of math problems are performed differently by these different elements. So a GPU has one way of doing it, and a TPU or an NPU may have only one way or maybe two ways to do things. And then a CPU, of course, being a general purpose processor, has a multitude of different ways that you can solve some of these problems, some of them efficient and some of them inefficient. So I like to think about it this way. So like take a CPU, and with apologies to my friends in the UK and Canada, in my neck of the woods, it was called an erector set, right? So you have an erector set with lots of different metal bits and pieces, and you have a wrench, and you have lots of nuts and things like that you can bolt into a tower if you're building a tower. And
we called it mechanical.
Exactly. You called it Meccano in the UK. But the bottom line is you could pretty much build anything that you wanted to. And when you built it, it would have a good amount of reliability. But boy, did you spend a lot of time wrenching, turning a wrench. Okay?
And that little wrench.
Exactly, that tiny little wrench, right? So a
Small.
CPU is really good at creating a structure, like a mechanostructure, that's very durable, very, very well built, pretty solidly engineered. But it's down to the tools that you need to perform the number of operations that you need to get to the state that is at the tail end of things. Now, flip over and think about the Tinker Toy from our youth, right? Where you have little wheels, and the wheels only have 4 or 5 different sprocket locations, and you have posts, and you can assemble the things into a tower. But the tower is probably going to have a predefined look and feel to it. It's probably not going to be jointed together in really solid ways. It only gives you a fixed amount of ways to assemble things. And so when you're asked to build a tower out of Tinker Toys, the towers typically look all the same, right? And that's kind of what a TPU or an NPU is good at. It's good at a specific and specialized set of math, but you can really assemble things very quickly. I mean, a Tinker Toy tower can come together really quickly. Doesn't require a whole lot of tooling. You can build them really quickly. And then on the flip side, I like to think about a GPU as like a classical Lego set. And I don't mean the ones that are pre-designed with the gigantic books that tell you how to build, bar a door from 10,000 pieces. I'm talking about the old school stuff, the classic sets that you would buy with 300 plus pieces in it. And you can build towers out of that. But they only joint together in certain ways. And it isn't necessarily that every single piece is relevant to the construction of the tower. You're only going to use maybe the long and the 4x if you're going to build a tower in that format. And so a lot of the Lego pieces you just don't ever use. And that's fine. But they join together really quickly, right? So like a Tinker Toy, you can get good results very quickly out of them. So I like to think about CPUs as being kind of the high-test construction kit that requires a lot of fine-tuning, and the TPUs and the NPUs being the really quick assembly Tinker Toys, and then the GPUs being a nice kit of different math operations, only some of which are relevant to the task at hand. Does that make sense to everybody?
It does.
Yeah. Now, a DPU or an IPU, that's like the crazy glue, okay? That's like if you finish all of these sets, you want to make sure that those operations don't come apart, and you want to make sure that they stay together. That's where the DPU comes in. It's kind of the interconnection between CPUs and GPUs, or TPUs and GPUs, using things like Falcon or Rocky or GPU Direct from NVIDIA. A DPU is capable of kind of creating glue between these systems to hold them together. So if you're mystified about what PU you need to use to do what you do, this is how I like to think about it.
So on the CPU side of things, and as you were describing this, a thought came into my head. Like, is there a difference between a RISC or a CISC chip in that relation? In that analogy, would a RISC chip be more GPU-ish?
That's a good question. So they're both general purpose processors. A RISC processor is going to require more software on the front side.
Which stands for reduced instruction set, and
exactly,
and complex instruction set. So just in case we're using analogies or
exactly.
No.
So think about it like a mechano set with 16 wrenches and 16 different sizes of nut, right? A RISC processor is going to have a lot more wrenches and a lot more different sizes. But the operations are essentially the same. You just have to remember to pick the right wrench. Something that's a CISC processor, like say an x86 CPU, may only have one wrench, but you still have to know how to spin that wrench, and you have to do those operations yourself.
Okay.
Now having said that, I will say that CPUs are far more capable today for AI workloads than they ever were. Things like AVX and AMX on the x86 side from Intel are really good ways of packing a lot of instructions together, a lot of words together, and doing things in one fell swoop. So some of these matrix multiplication math problems and some of the vector math problems are actually fairly easily solved by CPUs. Not to the same degree as an NPU or a TPU or a GPU, but they're pretty good.
So the new, maybe we're rat holing on this, but with the new chipsets that we have on say like this new fancy M3 MacBook that I've got, it has performance enhancing capabilities for AI workloads.
That's correct.
Are there dedicated GPUs in that box, or has the CPU been enhanced to include GPUs in the chipset itself?
A little bit of both. Okay, so at the base level, a CPU is better at certain types of math because it has new opcodes or new engines within it that are efficient at that. In the
Right.
case of the M series processors from Intel, what they've done is they've actually created kind of what I would call there's a general purpose CPU, and I would call the M series processors like a hybrid CPU. It includes a general purpose CPU core, but strapped around it are things like GPU operations cores and even TPUs. So you actually do have tensor cores within the M series
Right. I do
processors.
remember reading that. Yeah. So again, so this is a case where they might have had a risk chip, and what they've done is they've made it more complex and they've added more capabilities that you end up saying, I just need to reach for this particular wrench because it's going to give me this strength capabilities or
Yeah.
whatever, right? It's still multi-purpose and generalized, but
Yep.
there are things that allow it to be more specific in certain components inside that single chip, which reduces footprint and heat
Yeah.
capabilities and all those other things, right? So,
Yeah, so and I've mentioned this before on this podcast. The little secret of AI workloads is that AI workloads are built around a series of math problems, and a lot of things can perform the same types of math that are necessary to make AI work. We've kind of gotten ourselves wrapped around the axle that you need GPUs. Like, how many GPU cores can I possibly get? In the actual case, because there's different math operations, a GPU does lots more math than is necessary for AI. Sometimes you're looking for specific types of math for like prefill and decode, in which case CPUs can sometimes be exactly what you need for certain types of workloads, or a TPU can have superior performance on certain math operations like int8 than a GPU can have, right? So I think eventually we're gonna get fluent as an industry in this, and we're gonna start figuring out how to effectively use the different math engines that we have.
and the infrastructure that's required to make that communication, because you might get the performance increase or decrease, like performance enhancements, by
Yeah,
going to that chipset, but there could be costs involved in having to go across a bus to talk to that. And
yeah.
when we're doing many like teraflops to conversations,
Hmm.
that microsecond makes a difference, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Now, the great thing is the tools are rapidly improving in these areas. So things like PyTorch can now often figure out what math engines are available and use the right math engine or use a present math engine in the case that it doesn't have a GPU. So this stuff is all coming together. But again, we're going to have to get fluent enough in this technology as an industry to figure out what is best for what operation we're doing, and route or load balance directly to that, right?
well, so that yeah, so this is again intelligent routing that we want to be able to
Yep.
apply. But to the Google Ironwood TPU conversation, which is where
Yeah.
this sort of started, and I'm sorry I rat-holed a bunch of questions.
No
This
problem,
is
man.
where
We're
the
good.
TensorFlow enhancements become something that a service provider can provide to the end user without having to
Right.
build that infrastructure. So I think that's where what the Ironwood TPU is going to bring a Google BigQuery user, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Now let's go right into Google Ironwood because this Tinker Toy set is boy is it pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now I have to kind of peel this back a little bit. They make a claim in the in their presentation materials on this that I think you kind of got to understand what they mean. They say that when they scale upwards to 9,216 chips, they can do 42.5
Exaflop.
42.5 exaflops, and they say that's 24 times more powerful than the largest supercomputer in the world. Now, okay, let's back up on this. That's for certain types of operations. Okay, so what they're talking about is they're talking about the number of T-flops that they get in what's called int8, which is a specific type of math with a specific word size. The measurement of a typical vector supercomputer like El Capitan, for example, they draw from different types of math. So although it may do 42.5 exaflops in this specific type of math, it won't do it for everything.
Oh, okay.
So you got to understand that we're talking about a very specific measurement of performance. Now that said, 42.5 exaflops is absolutely amazing performance. You compare
Far less
this.
performance my old VIC-20.
Yeah, well, it's a little faster than a VIC-20. You compare this performance to some of the stuff that we see coming from other vendors like Intel's Gaudi or NVIDIA's Triton infrastructure, and this is 2 to 3x the performance of some of the top end systems that you see from the competition. Now, can you directly buy this? No. Google is going to provide it to you in a cloud format. The other thing is, there's a lot of open questions that we have about exactly what's being done here. First of all, when they debuted the Ironwood on main stage at their next event, it was very difficult to see exactly how the chip was actually laid out and constructed. Now, there have been some people who have gone through and have looked at how this is done. And I want to cover some things that are very notable about this. First of all, the increase in the amount of memory that's available to the individual instance is extreme. Okay, so compared to their prior generation, which is Trillium, they have gone from 32 gigabytes of high performance, high bandwidth memory to 192 gigabytes of instance per chip. Okay. Now, I can tell you, because I have some experience dealing with HBM memories, they're incredibly hard to get. This is a very specific type of memory, and to have 192 gigabytes oriented around this particular piece of silicon, that's a lot of memory per core.
You're not doing this with DDR4s.
Right. Now, that suggests to me a couple of things. First of all, I think that the way they're doing this is they've moved from monolithic silicon to what's called chiplet, which means they can take little pieces of HBM memory. And I think based on what I see 8 HBM cores arranged around their tensor cores. They're plugging that silicon together. Now, chiplet it tends to be a little bit more power hungry than silicon. So the projections that I have seen classify this chip as like a 900 to 1,000 watt part. That puts it into the same territory as a GPU. Okay. Now, the measurement of wattage is important to talk about because this system does appear to have excellent what's called performance per watt, meaning for every single watt, you get a lot of operational bang for your buck out of this. So if you take the amount of operations that they claim to perform at that 9,000 watts, at that 9,000 core count, you blow that up, you're talking about 9 to 10 megawatts of power needed to run this system. But for 42 exaflops, that is a really good bang for your buck. And so Google's done some really interesting stuff here. At the moment, I don't think you can buy this today. I don't think you can get into this today. But as this system comes online, I'm sure this is going to garner a significant amount of interest from the community.
Ooh, yeah.
I have a question, actually, Joel, and I'm trying to get at the essence of all the great stuff you're talking about. So these trade-offs, is it hardware design, algorithms, architecture, all of the above? And architecture, I'm talking about like interrupts and CPUs.
Yeah, so these systems don't really think in terms of interrupts, but what it is it's a limited set of math. Okay, so it's tensor cores. I think the math precision that they support is like FP8, INT8, and BF16, and that's it, right? So when decomposing these things are going to be really good at like the decode stage, but you're going to need some additional operations probably to handle prefill and training. But this and that's why I think they're advertising this as the inference engine or scaled inference.
Prefill then like moving data into like a tier 2 kind of storage, like a near GPU kind of thing.
Yeah. So if you think about it in terms of training systems, that's the math types that you need for that are more on the prefill side. Now the inferencing side is going to be incredibly important as people have models that are larger and larger and incorporate more parameters. You're going to need more HBM memory to store that, and you're going to need to go through those things at really fast clip. And that seems to be what Google is focused on right here. They aren't really talking too much about how this system can be used in training systems. They're talking about inference. And as we've talked on this podcast before, you really need to think about training or model creation and inferencing using existing larger models as two different types of operations, and they scale differently. Right?
So what about if I have sort of a large language model? I have many small language models. Would I still see the performance enhancement here because the switching would be different?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, small language models individually are going to have lower performance characteristics and token demands.
Right.
But if you run a whole bunch of SLMs on the same system, then you can think about those in aggregate, and they would still perform well.
And if you had a system where you could choose you could have a pre-inference where you could choose the right model, you could really improve the performance.
Look out, y'all! Pete's getting into product design mode.
No problem there.
But yeah, look.
I'm going to apologize to people listening to this. I'm nerding out listening and talking to Joel. I hope people are getting half as interested in what I'm talking to him about as I am.
Yeah.
So
no. Look, I want to be very clear about this. The Google Ironwood is a sea change in the way some of these systems are constructed. The fact that they have gone to like a 3D torus architecture and that they're at a 3 nanometer process for the chip production, that means this is the latest and greatest. This is as good as it gets. And the statistics that they have published so far on it are extremely exciting. Now, of course, as we get into this, we're going to find out that it's going to cost us. This is going to be offered as a service, I am sure, if it is Google, and so we are still unclear as to what the pricing per TPU chip is and what the pricing per operation is. But at least on paper, this looks extremely promising. Now, I also want to point out that at the same time, there were some announcements at GTC by NVIDIA about a new system to replace the Triton inference server with something different. It's called Dynamo. And Aubrey, I think you have a diagram on that. And this is the first time we've seen NVIDIA actually move from a package of GPUs for all types of math to prefill and decode stages being done on separate clusters of GPUs. So they're beginning to acknowledge that, so a big package of GPUs, oftentimes these operations have to scale differently, so we're going to split it apart into multiple groups of GPUs, and we're going to do those differently, okay? So this is kind of an acknowledgement that the GPUs are not necessarily, they're the Legos, right? So now they're having you pre-sort your Legos.
Yeah.
With the new Dynamo system. And so again, I think steadily the industry is getting better at understanding the underpinning math that's going on here. And that is a good thing. That means that we're going to see through things like Dynamo, the GPU systems getting more efficient or more performant per watt. And then on the flip side, you're going to see systems emerging for inference like Ironwood that are totally focused on performance per watt. So anyway, good stuff going on out there. It was a massive week in hardware. Past couple of weeks, it's been a massive month in hardware for AI. So I'm happy to come and give you guys the update on that.
And I think one of the things that we've seen is that hardware is very relevant in the discussions that we've had. Like some of the meetings that Joel and I were in this week are all around this concept of an AI factory. So the fact that people want to do their own training, they have to do their own training. There's data residency. There's concerns of anybody seeing this data. The interesting thing that I was talking to them about too is when they have concerns about the model themselves, building a model, and that has to be protected and air gapped in certain examples. Well, how do you start with an open source model in those cases? Because you have to bring that model in, and if you're familiar with the way security works, you can move up, right? But you can't move down. But if you're moving up, you have to validate that. So how do you validate a large language model? Like, how do you know that there's not something hidden deep inside that model that's ready to explode in 3 years' time? I'm just picking 3 years as a completely random number. Nothing to do with anything else in the world, but that there isn't something that says don't answer this, never uncover this until this happens or that happens. So there are things that you have to make sure that when you're looking at these open source models and doing this, these are things that have to be chosen and properly done. And so we're seeing people saying, well, I just want to start with nothing. I want to start and build my own model from the ground up. And there's a whole bunch of things that have to go on these. And that could just be because you have personal data in your system, and you don't want to expose it. It doesn't have to be geopolitical level data, information. And again, as we start looking at using tools, so I was making a joke earlier about using Copilot to précis an email for me. Sorry,
that was a long email, man.
It was a long email. He'll be on the podcast next week.
Yeah, next week.
Yeah. But it was very fantastic email. I'm joking, but my joke was I'm going to have Copilot précis this. Well, I also make sure that when I do stuff for myself, I prefer using ChatGPT and O1, but I don't do that for anything work related. I use our internal GPT, or I use Copilot, and there's some very different things. But it's easy for me to forget and break that barrier. I don't think I have, but doesn't mean I won't, and doesn't mean it won't happen with others who may or may not have the same conscious decision process and know why I shouldn't be doing that. So
remember Samsung? That was a couple of years ago, right? And then they're like, no Gen AI, turn it all off, which is not the answer, right?
And then we've also got companies like Spotify, where they announced this week saying, you have to prove, if you want to open an employee rec, you have to prove that you've gone and done the research, that can't be done by providing an AI tool to people that are already on the team.
I saw that. Yeah.
So then they better make sure they have the right tools, because if the people need to do that, then they're going to go and say, well, I'll use an open source tool. Is that the right answer?
Right.
Well, hopefully they're all geared up now that we've sort of laid out some of this new hardware stuff. And real quick, I did want to, you mentioned O1. I did want to kind of put some O1 checks into here, because I did feed the article to O1, and when I asked it for a high-level overview, it did give me all of the right specs that we just heard. And I then went ahead and asked it. I said, well, you're kind of made out of this stuff. So how is this going to benefit you? How do you see this as a beneficial thing? And it responded and said, as an AI model, updates on cutting-edge hardware like Ironwood are significant because, number one, they show progress in optimizing inference, which is, if you don't know what that is, the phase where an AI model thinks and provides output. It said, I like that it said thinks. Lori, if you're out there, it said thinks.
In quotes, I hope.
This directly impacts how future versions of models like me could operate more efficiently at scale. The second point that it came up with was large memory capacity and high performance interconnects. By the way, the interconnect, we didn't mention that, 1.2 terabits per second.
Yeah.
Very fast interconnect. So when we were talking about the bus, I was like, hey, that should be pretty high speed. Allow for more complex models, meaning advanced reasoning, bigger parameters, and faster responses, which would be fantastic because O1's response times are a little slow. And the focus on power efficiency, this is the third point, the focus on power efficiency and liquid cooling indicates that hardware providers are tackling the practical constraints of AI at scale, which helps ensure that running massive AI models can remain sustainable and cost effective. Overall, these hardware innovations pave the way for the next gen of AI systems, potentially offering faster training and richer interactions for users. I thought that was neat. I like that it seems to be kind of conscious about the benefits that new hardware can give it.
Well, it is that because you asked that question too.
I was about to say. Well, Aubrey, I didn't know I was going to go head to head with O1 today, but I hope I did all right.
Yeah, no, you did great. It was
So there's another question for Professor Joel here. So theoretically, if some researcher comes up with a better way to solve the math problem itself, could that sort of disrupt everything we're seeing here, or is all of that pretty baked?
No, it could. It could. I mean, there's always new thoughts in how some of these systems can be used to maybe provide the same outcome in a different precision or a lower precision for better performance. The research in this area is going to continue, right? So over time, I'm sure that there will be new emergent algorithms which will use different or more efficient types of math, or maybe even propose new ways of using those operations. So the story is not over here. Now, what I would say though is, the Ironwood system is based on a 3 nanometer process, which is about as low as we can go from a physical property perspective on the silicon. It uses an immense amount of HBM memory, and That is a finite and incredibly expensive resource. So think about math in terms of silicon performance being like this. There's the physical property aspect, and then there's the cost aspect, right?
Yeah.
And somewhere in the middle, there's something that is efficient and cheap, and everywhere else is either inefficient or expensive. So the industry is going to have to find that balance.
Effective.
Yeah.
It's when we're talking. I had to go, like, while you were saying 3 nanometers. I quickly asked ChatGPT, like, that's 30 angstroms. I mean, those were like, when I was in high school in the 80s. I mean, the word angstrom was such a weird concept that something would be measured in such that small of a value. But this is 30 of those things that I didn't think had a concept.
Yeah, I had a physics professor that referred to angstroms as wiggles, which I thought was really funny.
That was an Australian kids music band.
Mm-hmm.
The Wiggles.
That's
Yeah.
the Wiggles.
Some buddy of mine used to call them the fish for little, like fish for like PH for little kids.
That's great.
I don't know. I've never seen them on tour, so I can't tell you. Okay, well that we talked a lot about
We did.
the new hardware. So we do have a couple other things that did happen in the news as well. And geez, if I kind of switch back over to my browser, we are going to talk a little bit about OpenAI's operator in action. So for me, this was the really the first time I got a chance to take a look at. Well, I didn't, but O1 did for me. Got a chance to take a look at operator and kind of what it'll do for me. I mean, I've seen kind of the high level. I do understand the high level of it, but I did, and I do want to kick this one off with O1 if I could. So it's concise overview. I'm not going to kind of give it that. It's supposed to take over some tasks for your desktop and whatnot. So also it did catch the pricing in there, which is $200 a month, which
Not
seems
cheap.
yeah. So that's but I mean, is it worth it? I mean, that's something that Joel.
And you're also paying the $20 to just be. You have to be a plus to be.
Plus, yeah.
Yeah,
Is
like
it-
that's not $200 that gets you plus. That's
Is your AI worth being more expensive than your cell bill? Really?
Yeah, well, it depends. That is a good question. I think that's going to be different for every person who asks it, I bet. Now I asked O1, right? Like, because I did want to talk to O1 about it. And I said, how would that agent, because it is an agent, how would the agent be useful in conjunction with you? Really high level, please be brief. And it said, operator could handle the practical click and type tasks, booking flights and checking out online, while I provide conceptual, strategic insights or clarifications. Together, we'd streamline workflows. I'd help clarify goals or refine prompts. Then operator would carry out the actual web-based processes. So that led me to one question as it asked that. So I figured I'd ask it. I said, so I would just type to you what I'd need to do, and operator would start to do things on my desktop. Can I use my mouse and keyboard at the same time? That was one thing that I have not seen. I've kind of
Okay.
I've seen pictures of it moving and stuff, but my big question was, can I work alongside this thing? And it said yes, you can still use your mouse and keyboard. Operator runs in the background, essentially in its own browser session, while you maintain full control of your desktop. You can watch it carry out tasks and intervene at any point if you want to correct or override what it's doing. So that's what O1 had to say about operator. Of course, it's all OpenAI, so I'm sure it has some, it may be biased. I don't know if that's AI aren't supposed to be biased, are they?
This article was interesting because it wasn't perfect, and I don't know if I don't think Michelle Hawley is the author there. I'm sure her experience comes across as maybe not the best. Like, I think she kind of liked it, but thought it still missed a little bit. It wasn't quite perfect, which to me, I believe when I see that I don't think that these kind of operators are there yet. And I'm not all that sold on it just goes and browses a bunch of things. Like, I don't know if that's optimizing for my time. Like,
Yeah.
and if I have to watch this, I mean, that's the explainability that gives me, is I have to watch it do stuff. No, explainability needs to be, a bibliography at the end saying I found this on this website and I found this on this website, and I can go back and research the items I want.
Yeah.
Um,
I've played around with OpenAI Operator a little bit, and it's really interesting technology. It reminds me a ton of basically assisted Selenium scripting, if you've
yeah,
ever done browser automation back in the day.
exactly what I felt.
And the thing about Selenium automation that I remember very vividly is that depending on the types of operations that you're doing on the page and how your UX is constructed, sometimes deeply nested divs or dynamic ones are really hard to follow. So like things like hamburger menus on the side that have like auto slide out functions and then they slide out again. Operator can get really confused by that. But again, in all fairness, humans can get confused by that same stuff as well. So I can't take away full marks from Operator, but I have noticed that in terms of navigations, it's sometimes a little wonky, depending on exactly how slick somebody's taken their site design.
Yeah, there's actually a plug here talks about when it encounters a page where you need to log in or provide payment details or solve a CAPTCHA, it'll ask you to take over. So
Right.
I have a tendency to think about how things can be hacked, and I already thought about it with that statement there. But then there was something else that was interesting, and Aubrey, maybe you could tie this back to the OWASP stuff. There's like this ability to go and customize your profile, which I guess the operator leverages. And I'm like, okay, well, all you got to do is like hide some sort of injection or something in there, right? Or you just go in and change the settings, and then you're sort of like using somebody else's operator nefariously, kind of thing, right? There's all kinds of stuff that can go wrong, right?
Tying that back to OWASP, it made me think about system prompt stuff. I mean, that the thing about OpenAI is they I've been using their new, we got a new F5 GPT. I don't know if you guys have used it. So
Yes.
it's so good. But it's nice that they kind of expose that, right? The system prompt is right there. Although I'm used to reprompting just at the prompt. That's kind of what I've been doing. It allows you to kind of have a system prompt that's overarching as well. I don't know which one kind of wins out in a situation like that. And to your point, Byron, what if somebody hides something in that system prompt, right? Like authentication credentials is a common one.
Yeah.
People hide that in there, which is foolish, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah, of course, the new hotness in manipulation of system prompt is trying to change the system prompt by the role of the person connecting so that you're talking to them. So, like, this is an executive user, so you need to be utterly obsequious and that's a really funny way to use system prompting, but I've seen people do that to good effect.
Well, I had an interesting system prompt at the end, which I may or may not share. I told Byron already. We'll see.
All right.
Anything else about Operator that you guys want to share before we kind of?
Yeah. To me, it's interesting, and it's an interesting direction. I don't know. Again, to my point earlier, just where Gen Xers are with, and Boomers are with AI. That doesn't seem like this is advancing the thing at all.
Yeah.
There's a lot of adoption, and there are other tools I think that are to be better. The system that would go out and make a decision, even if it took a day to make a decision for me for a very complex thing, would be better than just having a browser. Like, I can go browse pages and get the data, or I can get a list of links to go to it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's lackluster to me. So.
Operator is fun, and it helps you navigate sites that don't necessarily have open or available APIs. But quite honestly, if a system wants to offer something to an AI system, they should do so using strongly typed, well-documented APIs instead of trying to manipulate the UX. There's so much room for error by manipulating UI. And those change so rapidly, and like a simple upgrade of your React version can utterly wreck the way your site navigation was trained. So I would prefer an approach that actually uses strongly typed and open APIs. But I'm also an engineer, so
yeah. And again, I think the OpenAI operator is the Lego box of things, right? It's a whole bunch of things. Whereas if I wanted to do a trip planning thing, I would rather go to a travel agent who had an agent and asked me a bunch of questions. And that's where the strongly taped API can be used. And that would give me a better experience and then provide me something, which might still mean I go into the mall and sit down with a travel agent, but I'm sitting there in an informed position, which that is the way I like to book my travel for our vacations. Versus just going in and saying, I don't really want to know, I'm going to take a couple weeks off next year. Tell me what I'm going to do. Right. I would rather say these are the best times, look at my calendar, all these things, and then have that. So if that's agentic AI, to me, that's better than a Lego box where I open it up and go, all right, what am I going to build today? Right. So.
Well, it makes me wonder truly what kinds of indirect prompt injections these things are going to fall for. That's my big curiosity with it. Only time will tell. And of course, if you are F5 leadership and you're out there watching the podcast, you heard it here first. Pete doesn't want his license. I'll take it. So moving on with my new operator license, I think we are going to talk a little bit more about 2025 key cybersecurity challenges, which I'm glad you brought this to me, Byron, because I just did. I have another podcast out there called AppSec Now, which is also a DevCentral podcast, and we do stuff with CERT and F5 Labs. So a lot of what this article had to say really mirrored what Labs has been talking about with their end of year report and the bot report recently. What are your thoughts on it, man?
Yeah, 100%. And what comes out of Joel's team, Office of the CTO, right? Like, if you could basically corroborate everything, like, F5's own research with the industry. And the thing that I took away from this is it's all interrelated, right? We talked a lot about operators and kind of getting into agent stuff. And I continue to riff off of Joel's double-edged sword analogy for AI. It's going to make attacks more sophisticated. It's going to democratize them, meaning more people can, execute them. But it's also going to help defenders, right? Especially when it gets into Gen AI and sort of offloading the burden, making up for the, we still have this negative, set of security engineers out there. We don't have enough. But then it gets into like ransomware, and it gets into DDoS. And this is all interrelated because now you can use LLMs to go find a vulnerability in an application and then exploit it, and that it could be a threat vector for ransomware, right? We also see using AI to make more convincing phishing emails, because the reality is a lot of the ways you can detect it as a human is you're looking for misspelling, you're looking for something that doesn't make sense in the verbiage itself, and a lot of times because these criminal enterprises are from English is not their first language, so they have a huge advantage now being able to offset that. So, and then for DDoS, it mentioned using AI to bypass CAPTCHA, as well as using proxy infrastructures, and F5 Labs has talked a lot about that, residential proxy. So to me, it's sort of like put everything together as to why AI is both good and bad for cybersecurity.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time thinking about the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And I think that for the longest period of time, we really haven't had to worry about integrity all that much. Like, there's malware for sure. What I really worry about is data that comes through that looks good because it was generated using elements of data that is good and elements of data that is bad. And so things like deepfakes really challenge integrity. And that gives me pause. A lot of times, AI systems will generate data that is composed of data that may be private, and you may have signatures, right, for all the documents that went into generating the model. But what you don't have is the ability to figure out what's coming out of the model, because you've never seen it before. It's never been at rest before. So classification and categorization of data in transit is a huge challenge. Like, AI has essentially wrecked the data leakage prevention market, and it's due for a rebuild. We got a whole bunch of challenges that emit from AI. But what I'm excited about is the ability for AI to take all this mass data that's coming in from all these systems of record and actually make SIMs do actual SIM things for the first time. in assisting cybersecurity practitioners in figuring out where the value is, where the nuggets are in the information that they've collected from all their control systems. So again, double-edged sword. The attackers
Yeah,
have equal access. Luckily,
you
the
made me think of
defenders
that.
have that.
Oh, sorry, Joel. You make me think of that Target breach. Remember the huge one, and the SOC had the alert, but
Yeah,
there was just too much noise.
that's
Like
right.
you're like classic example, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the data leakage thing I was going to sort of tag on to what Joel was saying is, so data leakage is something we thought of, okay, we need to make sure this information doesn't go out because it's got PII or whatever. But there's other reasons we don't want this stuff to come out too. And the challenge is it's never, as Joel says, it's never been at rest before. It's never been analyzed in such a way. But there is things we need to worry about, like with respect to bias and inferring things that we didn't ever have before, because it was never in one document. It was in 7 documents, right? So if you take the healthcare issues, right? So for the issues that healthcare can have with this, can I interpret from testing results at a state level, then testing results at a city level or a hospital level to find out that somebody has a particular, protected disease, right? And that information is available, and it's not in one spot. It's in 7 different things. But because that model has that, we need to be able to classify that information in transit and be able to prevent that. So this is going to be a real problem, I think.
Classification is going to have to change from signature or pattern matching to context matching.
Yes,
being able to detect context, and that is an order of magnitude harder challenge. But yeah, 2025 is going to be really interesting to see all these systems try to cope with the volume of data out there.
I think so too. And just to kind of get that back with the O1 and what it had to say, it did summarize the article, which is fine. I'm not going to blow through that. But an interesting bit here, I said, I asked it, are there any thoughts from you overall on the article? Anything worry you more than another as an AI? I mean, you live in the cloud on infrastructure that faces these risks. And it corrected me and says, as an AI, I don't worry. But from a purely technical standpoint, certain points stand out. AI enhanced threats. Agentic AI can automate exploitation at scale, making attacks faster and more precise. This poses a major challenge to the very infrastructure that hosts AI services. Next, it said quantum computing. Once powerful enough, quantum computers could break widely used encryption, threatening much of the cloud security foundations. I think we talk a lot about that with Q-Day coming up and whatnot. Expanding attack surfaces, for example, health and space, which were referenced a couple times in the article. With healthcare systems, satellites, and mission-critical services becoming more digitized, there are more places for vulnerabilities to emerge. Overall, these developments underscore how crucial it is for cloud-based AI, in parentheses, me included, I love that it said me, to benefit from fast, adaptive defenses, potentially through the same advanced AI and quantum-safe strategies that attackers might try to misuse. I felt like that last bit was a little bit garbage, kind of like just chat. But the interesting bit here also is I did reprompt it right afterwards and asked if it could give me the same answer, but as a Rastafarian.
Oh my!
It just
did a
came
good
up,
job. He shared it.
It did a great job. I'm not going to try
Okay.
to. I'm not going to try to say that because I think that would not be appropriate. I don't think, but it really. I mean, I was shocked. As far as just kind of like having lingo down and using, just sort of certain phrases and things like that you might hear in reggae songs, etc. It really did a great job.
The other thing too is, like, going back to the small language model thing I had earlier, then it would be better if it was able to pass that through a small language model and give you context, which wouldn't just be song based, but more Rastafarian, ethics, and it's a dogma, right? So,
Right.
So there are things that maybe that we don't necessarily know in the mainstream, and my earlier comments about bias. Maybe that would have helped address some of the bias issues. So
true, and you may also find the same sort of thing with a mixture of experts sort of model, where one of the particular models was Rastafarian expert.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't know, guys. This is advice I think I'm gonna have to bypass for my executive presentations.
Yeah,
I don't think they'd have the same level of appreciation of the
no.
That's
theming
actually
that we do.
A legitimate use case, Joel, is we're talking about security and geeking out a little bit, security engineer level, but perhaps, hey, just what Aubrey just showed, now explain that to a business leader and see if it can do it effectively. The thing I'm noticing is Gen AI in particular is terrible with acronyms, like whether it's all the tools we use internally or some of the experimenting I've done, and I don't know how that. I guess over time maybe that'll get better, but.
Well, TLAs, which is what we have, are redundant and used so many different times, right? So that again goes back to the model should understand, and that should be a RAG component to say here are the possible uses of these different TLAs. Here's the reasoning for it, and it would help answer that. The Rastafarian conversation, certainly is a landmine I don't want to step on, but it's very important in some of the things that I've done recently with talking to state level organizations who are looking at AI systems, and they have to deal with people who have limited computer abilities or computer availability in different languages, and they have to make sure that they can address their concerns in an appropriate way and answer them in an appropriate way. Sometimes simply translating English to another language is not the right way to do it. So you have to make sure that you are understanding the full context of those. And those are the things that we're not really talking, because we're talking a lot of this from a technical perspective. There is a huge human element that needs to be addressed in the adoption of Gen AI and agentic AI. And those have to be properly addressed. And this is where, the NAS CIO, which is an organization of all the CIOs across the US, they poll them monthly and get some information, and they're really trying to get their heads around how do they do these kind of things, and the human touch side of it could be not a landmine, it could be a nuclear explosion if it's done incorrectly. And we've seen problems with it, right? I brought up the one where we have an unfortunate accidents with people interpreting the AI as a human and saying me and personifying itself. That those are problems that we need to make sure that we're addressing before they become unavoidable problems.
Well, they passed the Turing test, right? AI has already done that, so it's
yeah. And I can't do it. I can't do a CAPTCHA to save my life. I failed one yesterday 9 times, and I finally stopped logging into the app. Like, it was asking me to click on all the crosswalks, click on all the bikes. I don't know. Is that still part of the bike? Is there a crosswalk?
Right? If it's just the top of the line, is it? Yeah.
Literally, it was 9 times. It was 3 times each time, and it never let me in. Sorry, it's not.
I have noticed Google been asking for CAPTCHAs more than I recall not too long ago. I don't know if they've made some changes in their infrastructure.
Yeah, I don't know. It was not a good experience for me, so I decided to not log into that app and just go somewhere else.
That's okay. The internet's a big place, Pete. So on that note, I think we have gone on a long time today. So thank you. I appreciate it, gentlemen. Always great to hang out with you. And of course, thank you, community, for tuning in to another episode of AI Friday. Please don't forget to check us out next week. We will be talking, as long as it goes as planned, with Corey Marshall about AI agent identity. So that is becoming a big, hot topic. And we've mentioned things like, zero trust for AI employees and things like that. What does that look like? So I think we're going to tackle some of that next week with Corey. All righty.
All right.
Until then, have a great weekend and have a happy remainder of your AI Friday. Bye all.
Kyle.
Bye-bye.
We hope you liked this instantiation of AI Friday. We'll be instantiated again next week, same time, same place, and hope to again infer with you. Before we depart, promptly subscribe for all our content and click like to let us know you enjoyed AI Friday.